Hello everyone and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces Talks Music. Today I'm going to be talking about probably, in my opinion, the most underrated album of all time. I have quite a few records that I feel like didn't get the acclaim that they deserved, but this one is the top of the list, and I hope that I can do it justice so that everybody that watches this video goes out and listens to it, because this is an incredible album, and it is a shame that not many people really know about it. And that album is Parachute by the Pretty Things, which was released in June 1970. And before I get into this album proper, I wanted to talk just a tiny bit about the Pretty Things. They were formed in 1966. And I think their biggest claim to fame, if I were to hazard a guess, would be that in 1967 they were recording at Abbey Road Studios at the exact same time that the Beatles were recording Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and that Pink Floyd were recording Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And Norman Smith was the producer of both Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn and the album that the Pretty Things were recording, which is called SF Sorrow. And this album, SF Sorrow, is considered to be the earliest concept record. It beats the Tommy's The Who by a couple of years. But unfortunately, and I'm not going to be able to tell this whole story, there's a whole essay about it in the liner notes of SF Sorrow, the more modern versions. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get it out in time. And this is not just the record company's fault, it's also the band's fault. Just a whole lot of things made this take longer to come out, and many rock journalists believe that if SF Sorrow would have come out before Tommy and around the same time as Sgt. Pepper's and Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn, it would be one of the most talked about albums in the world, and probably this band would be one of the biggest bands in the world. But that didn't happen, which is probably hell on the guys in the band, I would assume. But anyway, we're not here to talk about SF Sorrow. I just wanted to tell that quick story to kind of situate where these guys should go in rock and roll history. Really, truly, they had a very Tommy-esque concept record before The Who did. But we're going to talk about the album Parachute. When I went back and I listened to the other albums, they were all pretty good, and I felt like these guys maybe deserved a better place in music. When I heard Parachute, my jaw dropped. This is, in my opinion, really truly one of my favorite albums of all time. The musicians are so good, and the vocals are so incredible that they obviously, not unlike the Beatles, had been doing this for years. They are so tight as a band, and they are so skilled at singing. It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. We're going to go by track by track for just a minute, in just a minute. But it is interesting. I wanted to quickly note. So this band was formed by Phil May and Dick Taylor. Dick Taylor was guitar. Phil May was vocals. And Dick Taylor was really unhappy after SF Sorrow did so badly and left the band. And so he was replaced by Victor Unit from the Edgar Broughton Band. And I don't know if I'm saying that right. But yeah, Victor Unit does guitar on Parachute, not Dick Taylor. I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to in order to describe kind of what this album is to me. And that is, this album sounds like the Beatles. And I very much like the Beatles, but I think that the Beatles are a band that produced music for so long and were so innovative that they couldn't help but be great. And I feel like the best way to describe this album is if the Beatles recorded a follow-up to Abbey Road and they were still super hungry for success. And it doesn't help that Wally Waller sounds, that's the bassist, sounds so much like John Lennon, in my opinion. And even Phil May has such a gritty voice. It reminds me of Paul McCartney on moments of Abbey Road. Really incredible Beatles-esque sounding, but I don't want to make it seem like these guys are derivative, and I'm going to keep mentioning the Beatles, and that's why I'm bringing this up right now. This isn't derivative of the Beatles. It's as good as the Beatles, in my opinion, and is heavier and harder than the Beatles. A lot of people, I saw a comment somewhere that said, this album is just okay. Parachute is just okay because Deep Purple and Uriah Heep and all these other bands were already doing better hard rock at that time. And I cannot disagree with this more. This is not a hard rock album that belongs next to Deep Purple and Uriah Heep. I'm going to be doing some Uriah Heep later. I like both those bands. This is a different thing. And it's going to be very elusive and hard to describe how different this really is. So the best I can do, I'm going to go track by track. If you want to pull up another YouTube window, go find one of the many copies of this album online and listen to the tracks as I go through them. I think that if you take the time to do that, you will have a heck of an experience. And I think if you listen to this album at least 2 times, you will keep listening to it, and it will become one of your favorite records of all time. I really think it will. One last thing before I start going into this album track by track. I did see one of the songs, I think it's Sickle Clowns, or maybe it was Cries from the Midnight Circus. Either way, there's a TV series called Britannia. And in the second season, they used a Pretty Things song during a really intense scene where all these decapitated heads were being catapulted over this fortress wall, and they were playing the Pretty Things, and it was awesome. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, these guys are going to get a little more recognition for how insanely good this record really is. So this album opens with a couple medleys, which is really interesting because in a way, to me, this continues this Beatles connection that I have. And again, I don't want to say that these guys are derivative. It's similar to me, I guess, in the way that ELO started their career by wanting to take a lot of the ideas that the Beatles had in Strawberry Fields Forever and create a career from there and move on from there, but keep those ideas. I don't want to call ELO derivative. They were highly inspired. And I think these guys were inspired as well. But I feel like a really fun way to listen to this is to listen to Abbey Road, and then right at the end of Her Majesty, start scene 1 from this album. So, it opens with this medley. And the medley was originally 2 tracks with 3 parts each, but they've now been broken up on later CD releases. And the first one is scene 1. The coolest thing about this is they make their guitar sound like a horn. And maybe that is a horn. I have no idea, but it has this really heavy rhythm and these flowing harmonies between the different players, and it's just this. The only way I can describe it is almost spooky opening to this incredible record, and it's like a minute long. At which point it kicks into The Good Mr. Square, which is mainly sung, I assume, by Phil May in falsetto, with a lot more of these kind of Beatle-esque harmonics. And like I said, this could This is easily another step in the medley at the end of the Abbey Road, kind of taken up a notch. And that breaks way into she's tall, she was tall, she was high. This is probably the closest that they get to this Beatles sound. It almost, I mean, even the lyrical style mimics "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window." So at this point, I could say that this was probably the most Beatles-inspired moment on this whole record. That ends the first medley, although to me the second one just seems like a continuation. The whole first 11 minutes of this album seem like a medley, and it's interesting to start the album with a medley when Abbey Road ended with a medley. But this goes on to "In the Square," "The Letter," and "Rain." And "In the Square" and "The Letter" have a tendency to, I feel like, connect to this theme that's been going on, this very low-key kind of Beatles reminiscent theme. But the middle of "Rain" is when we witness the first morph, the first change in this record. And "Rain" is the last song in the medleys. And halfway through it, a kind of a faster strumming guitar comes in, and Wally Waller starts playing really high up on the bass. Sounds absolutely incredible. And the drums come in, and we suddenly get a heavier sound that is going to stay with us for a large chunk of the rest of this album. And we still have the harmonies going, but there's this grit, and they're starting to sing. They're getting louder. There's almost an angriness that starts happening in the harmonies at the end of "Rain," and then that ends, and we get into the core of the record. And for me, this is for me the best part of this record, and I love every part of this record. But we start with Miss Fay Regrets, which is a rocking number. But again, it's not, for me, I don't connect it to hard rock like Deep Purple and Uriah Heep. I connect it to a little bit to the direction Let It Be was going, or to "You Never Give Me Your Money," when that piano kicks in and Paul starts singing. That kind of hard rock. Imagine taking that really awesome moment, out of college, money spent, see no future, pay no rent, taking that really amazing moment and making a plethora of songs that have the talent, the grit in the voice, and the energy of that one moment. And that's what occurs here, not in a derivative sense, but in an inspirational sense. These guys kill it. And if you're only going to listen to one of these songs, to see if you like this or not, it should be one of the next four, and I'll let you know which one's my favorite. But Miss Fay Regrets, every bit of the album, from the beginning of side one to Miss Fay Regrets, which is still on side one, has been an incredible build. And when we hit Miss Fay Regrets, we get the real rocking sound of this band. And that moves on to Cries from the Midnight Circus. And I think it's either this one or the next one are my favorite on the album. So I would say, if you're going to listen to one song, just look up Cries from the Midnight Circus by the Pretty Things. Give it a listen, and I think you'll want to come back and hear this whole album. But I will say, I would prefer that you start at the beginning and listen to the whole album to really, really give it a fair shake. I'd listen to it twice to give it a fair shake. But yeah, Cries from the Midnight Circus creeps along. The rhythm section does this amazing kind of creep along, and you've got Phil May and Wally Waller singing in this one, and they both are just giving it their all. It is so good. Really incredible vocals on this track. And that moves into Grass, which is the beginning of side 2. And Grass kind of calms down a little bit after the massive end of side A with Cries from the Midnight Circus. But Grass has some of the best guitar work on the record. Just really incredible guitar solo at the end of Grass. And then we get into Sickle Clowns, which is the other massive song on this. If there were singles, it would either be one of those two, Cries from the Midnight Circus or Sickle Clowns. And Sickle Clowns, I think Wally Waller sings more. Wally Waller is probably, because of this record and his moments on SF Sorrow, listen to the song Barren Saturday on SF Sorrow. He only sings one little part on Barren Saturday, but when you hear the screaming come in, you know it's Wally Waller. It's unfortunate to me. He became a producer and did very well for himself, but a singer of that caliber, a vocalist that good, I'm surprised we don't talk about him in the same way we talk about John Lennon. I mean, just an incredible singer. And Wally Waller and Phil May wrote all the songs on this record. I mean, they're just incredible musicians. I'm gobsmacked constantly that we're not talking about this album in the same breath with the Beatles album Let It Be. We should be. It's incredible. So Sickle Clowns, I think Miss Faye Regrets, Cries from the Midnight Circus, Grass, and Sickle Clowns, those 4 make up the major core of this record. The other couple of songs on the songs that bookend this core 4 are all incredible. They all feel a little bit like medleys, which is not a negative statement at all. It's awesome from start to finish. And we get the track She's a Lover, which rocks just as hard as the stuff in the core 4, but halfway through returns to these harmonies that were at the beginning. And from there, we move on to What's the Use, which is only 1 minute and 45 seconds and could fit easily in the medley at the beginning, except for this return to the medley style at the end of the album is not a complete return in the sense that it morphs. There's the medley section at the beginning, and then there's the hard, almost Beatles, if they were, inspired to be harder, in the middle. And then at the end, the two come together, and you get the heaviness of the core 4 in the middle with the structure and harmonies of the medley. And that ends with Parachute, which is the final song, which is the only song to have a credit that isn't Phil May and Wally Waller, and that is May and Norman Smith, who was the producer of this record as well, and he helped write the end one, and it's an instrumental that just ends on kind of an epic end of the movie feel, with some amazing guitar work, and then kind of a raising, almost keyboard synth sound that I feel like bookends and reflects the beginning of this record from the medley perspective. I cannot gush about this album enough, and even just thinking about what I've said so far, I feel like I haven't done this justice. Out of all the things I've talked about, this is the one I would love you to go listen to the most. This should be talked about more. These musicians are so incredibly talented. They deserve to be on the top 100 albums of all time. Way, way up near the top with this record especially. Just absolutely incredible. One of the most underlooked lost albums I've ever heard. Parachute by the Pretty Things. go listen to it right now. If you liked this, click like. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. We'll be making a lot more of it in the future. And thank you so much for watching. Go listen to the Pretty Things Parachute. You will not regret it.